So throughout the session, if you could please post questions in the chat and we'll pick them up at Q&A intervals throughout, that would be great. Do put any questions relevant to what Karina's going through into there, and yeah, I will pick them up. So before we go any further, who is here today? Ruth from Made Unique in Watford, and someone from London, that's Rose from Sprout Up Schools. Someone in South Yorkshire, Hannah, supporting people with disabilities to improve access to leisure and recreation. Someone in East Hertfordshire, that's Karina, the funding doctor. It's so great getting people from all over the country in these sessions. Hannah from Lancashire. And a few more of you on today's call that haven't written in there yet, but so good to have you all here. Also here today, my brilliant colleague Karina from the Action Funder Assemble team. And leading today's session is Karina Hartwig, the funding doctor. So Karina has helped so many organisations, charities, social enterprises find funding over the years, and she's worked extensively across the world of fundraising for the likes of the Big Lottery, EU Rural Development Funding Programme, that one's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? The Plunkett Foundation, and delivered really popular workshops for Assemble, for Action Funder, for the Eden Communities team, for voluntary sector training, Big Lunch Extras, just to name a few. And particularly importantly, she has personal experience of community projects, setting up small enterprises, getting the funding in and reporting on the impact that she has made. So Karina will be taking us through impact measurement today, from the theory of change to how to measure impact and how to report it. And before I hand over to Karina, I'll remind you all, do post those questions in the chat, and save any queries you have about Action Funder for the end, when we'll be spending a few minutes talking about the platform. But for now, over to Karina.
Thank you very much, Lorna, for the very kind introduction, and thank you for the Assemble team for bringing us all together again. In order to find out a little bit more about who you lovely people are in the room, we have prepared a little poll. That's to get you involved a little bit as well. So if we could kick the session off with that one, and if Karina could kind of launch it, that would be brilliant, because we would like to know from you how confident you are currently about demonstrating the positive changes of your idea, your project, or your organization. So if you're not very, very confident, it's a little confident. If you're in the middle, it's somewhat. And if you're really confident, then I would love to hear from you as well, because you can be the other expert in the room. So we are still waiting. If you could just take part in the poll, that would be great. We still got some votes coming in, which is brilliant. Just one more left. But from what I can tell so far, we have about 75% of you feel somewhat confident, which is great, and about 25% feel a little confident. And this is really the session for you today here, because I'm going to talk you through a simple way of talking about impact and about shouting about your successes. So I will now share my screen, which hopefully works. I just need to move that around a little bit. That's right. So can you all see the first slide? Yeah, I hope you can. Brilliant. So again, hello, I am Karina Hartwig, also known as the funding doctor, and I want to share with you my experience as a volunteer for a successful community project that raised over £95,000. And since working as funding doctor, my funding doctor coat on here, especially for you, and in groundmaking roles, I have learned a lot on the subject of impact that I want to share with you. I am just trying to bring on. So here's a little overview on what we will cover today. We will look at one simple model of the theory of change, which is basically a big concept, but as a first step. Because in order to measure and report on impact, we need to first show the funder how we're proposing to change things for the better, for the people and the planet. Then we will look how to measure the impact in easy and practical terms before finally looking at how to best shout about our successes through impact reporting. Hopefully after this webinar, you will be better placed to explain skillfully to funders on Action Funder what difference your project will make, and hopefully you will secure that all important funding. So let's get started. Measuring your impact is a key step in the funding process. It is important for funders to understand exactly how their money will be spent and the incredible impact you will make. However, in order to measure, we need first to describe and define exactly what our idea is, why we had the idea, and what the problem is, and what our solution to the problem will look like, and who will benefit from the change. Sorry, I have a little delay in forwarding my slides. So in our previous budgeting workshop, I used the example of a community plant growing project. And if it's okay with you, we'll carry on using this today to illustrate the theory of change. And here is the vision for our example project. We want to create this amazing green oasis where the community can come together to grow plants and food, take a break, to be active and enjoy the natural environment and feel better connected to their communities. And here is what the space currently looks like. So in order to successfully attract funding, your job is to explain to the funder in very clear and simple terms how you're going to make this miracle happen. The miracle is to transform this sad, slightly unloved and underused space into the vibrant community space, the green oasis. Describing how you're going to make it happen is called the theory of change. A theory of change is a tool that shows an organization's path from needs to activities, to outcomes, to impact. It describes the change you want to make in the steps involved in making the miracle happen. There are different logic models and tools around, but a simple one that does the job perfectly well is called the outcome triangle, and I love using it because it just works. So let's take a closer look at this tool. It's super useful in helping you to demonstrate the correlation of the different elements of your project and how these bring on the change that you're aiming for. Essentially, it helps you to illustrate what a program or change initiative does. So your initiative, its activities and interventions, and how these lead to the desired goals being achieved, and which desired changes are expected to happen in a particular context. It helps you to focus in particular on the pink outcomes block, because many funding applications fail because applicants forget to define their clear outcomes. And I've seen that many a times, because only when you define your outcomes will you be able to measure the impact. So let me explain in greater detail each of the elements of the triangle by using our example. All right, first we're looking at the problem in more detail. So you really need to listen to your community and make some observations, because then you can start to describe the problem. So for example, in our example, the problem could be that the space is neglected and underused. Hardly anyone likes using it, especially lonely residents don't dare using the space. It's not inviting or attractive. So you start to look a little bit deeper and dig a little bit deeper into this problem. Why does it even exist? And the underlying causes could be that there's too much litter and dog mess that are spoiling the space. Perhaps antisocial behavior is happening. And residents in this area are feeling disconnected from their local green area, so don't use it enough and maybe feel unsafe to use it. So there's no real sense of belonging or ownership of the space. And of course, you have lots and lots of ideas about what to do about the problem. Actually, you get really excited about all the wonderful things that you could do, such as plant flowers or vegetables, shrubs or small trees, organize and coordinate some litter picking, run a free to access regular gardening club. If only you had the money. So now funders on Action Fund and others want to know what activities you're planning to put on. So activities can also be sometimes called objectives. They basically describe your planned area of work. So planting flowers, planting shrubs and trees, or organizing and coordinating litter picking. So back to our example, your objective is to regreen the area and make it more attractive by planting flowers, vegetables, shrubs, and small trees. These are all your activities. But you will also need to tell the funder your outputs, and they're basically measured in numbers. So for example, you planted 20 shrubs, 10 fruit trees, and 10 varieties of easy to grow vegetable and flowers. Or another one could be, for example, you involve 15 volunteers in planting these. So these are kind of called outputs, and they're directly linked to your activities. That's how you can count what you've done. Outputs can also be related to your beneficiaries. They are the people who are benefiting from your project. And apologies if we are overburdening you with a little bit of jargon here. We are also putting on a third workshop that is especially looking at all the different words and jargon that the funders are using. So the funders' language, come and book onto them as well. But back to our example, and back to an outcome, one more just as an example. For example, 2 elderly residents have taught 10 children how to grow plants from seed. So you had your problem, you listened carefully, and you are brimming with ideas what to do in terms of activities, and you start to get an idea of how to measure your activities in terms of output. Now, the funder also wants you to define the need, and that's by carefully listening to your community, by talking to them and knowing what you want to do. That it's time to capture, research, and describe the problem in greater detail still, to quantify how big it actually is. This is when you try to understand how big the problem is and how much your solution is really wanted. And that's basically called describing the need for your idea, and it complements the problem. You will need to find statistics, reports, research papers, capture people's views, and much more. And it's a very good idea to look at relevant statistics, for example, for the Office of National Statistics, or perhaps at your local community strategies that you can get from your local councils that tie in with the focus area that you will have indicated on Action Funder as well. So now you can see how your project is taking more shape, and you start to see a bigger picture emerging, a bigger picture of change that you want to bring about. And it's time now to actually formulate your aim. The aim of your project is the big change that your organization and project wants to be a part of. It's usually a long-term or broad change that you want to contribute to, rather than one you will achieve alone. In our example, our aim could be to establish a resident-led and coordinated approach to enhance the communal areas and to improve the health and well-being of all residents. So take your time to formulate your aim. Check it's clear enough to be understood from outside of your group or your organization, and that it's linked to the problem that you have identified. If you are a constituted charity, your aim should also be related to your overall mission. And if you're a social enterprise, it should be related to your social purpose. And once you have formulated your aim, your overall solution, all it's left to do is to explain the difference your project is going to make. And finally, we are coming to see the all-important pink block, which is often called the missing middle, because applications and applicants simply forget to talk about their outcomes in the funding applications. But funders really fund outcomes, the changes, not activities. It's because the funders are interested in the changes that their pennies are basically funding. So what are outcomes? Basically, outcomes, once more, are the changes, positive or negative, that occur as a result of your activities in the short to medium term. They have to be achieved to support progress towards your overall aim. For example, here, an increased sense of belonging through involvement, or a greater community cohesion, or a decrease in depression. Outcomes should use words that indicate changes such as increased or improve, or less or decrease, for example. It also really helps to make them SMART, specific, measurable, relevant to your aim, and time-bound. And here is an example of SMART outcomes. So a quarter of the residents aged 55 plus will have an improved sense of belonging, 20% improved sense of belonging between the 1st of June 2021 and the 30th of September 2021. Can you now see how this SMART outcome lends itself to be measured? This was basically a whistle-stop tour of the different elements of the outcome triangle. And I really hope that you can see the value in spending time on your theory of change, because you will only be able to measure your changes if you have invested time and defined all the different elements in greater detail and cross-checked their correlation. So now it's time to take a couple of questions, if there is some, for a tiny little mini Q&A. If there's any questions related directly to the outcome triangle, I'd be happy to answer them right now. If not, I'm quite happy to move on to the impact measurement straight away.
We don't have any questions in the chat yet, but would anyone like to put their microphone on and ask a question on the theory of change or the outcome triangle before we move on to how you can measure the change? No, you gave too good an explanation, Karina. If anyone has any thoughts and queries, do as we move forward and something comes up, just pop them in the chat.
Okay, in that case, I will just carry on. So, okay, because now we spend time on our theory of change by describing the outcomes we want to achieve and by turning them into SMART ones, we can now move on to thinking about measuring these changes. Before you start measuring, it's important to consider the reasons why you want to measure outcomes and what you actually will do with the evidence and the data that you will gather. So here are a few reasons why you might like to measure. For example, measuring the changes will help you to develop a baseline information to measure the change over time. It could also demonstrate results against key performance indicators for your project. It also could help to understand better how to develop and improve your services, or also how you can promote the service among both service users and report back to the funders. So finally, you are also better to understand the greater changes your project can make to more people as you gather the evidence of the change. And basically, that's what's called impact. So impact is measured over a longer period of time, and it makes a greater difference to more people compared to outcomes who are short and midterm only. Just changing the slide. So once you have decided why you want to measure, you can then dive deeper and think about what you want to measure, and then start thinking about how to set up your very own key indicators. For example, broadly speaking, action funders will want you to show that there are positive changes to people and the planet. Review your list of outcomes and think carefully about what information you need to collect as evidence of change. What are the signs that you have been successful? How can you tell when you have made progress? The answer to these questions will generally make strong indicators. So writing a clear list of indicators will make developing and choosing the right data collection tools so much easier for you. And next, I will talk about how you can set up those indicators. Your outcome indicators should be expressed in neutral language and not use words that indicate change. This is because you need to collect the data before you know whether or not the intended improvement has happened. You can use number of, type of, how often, and your outcome indicators should also be tailored to your context. So it's good practice to set at least 2 indicators to measure each outcome. When putting your indicators together, you might combine numbers, the quantitative data, and description and narrative, which is called the qualitative data, to give you a fuller picture of what has changed. Also, by combining different perspectives, such as subjective and objective indicators, you can achieve a more robust picture of whether or not change has happened. So let me give you an example again to illustrate this theory. Remember our SMART outcome from earlier, our single measurable change of a quarter of residents age 55 plus will have improved their sense of belonging by 20% between the 1st of June and the 30th of September. Now, can you maybe help me? What kind of indicators that you could use as key indicators in order to measure now this SMART outcome? Feel free to pop a few in the chat. Help me. So what can you measure in our SMART outcome? We were talking about a quarter of the residents, they're aged over 55 plus, and they will have an improved sense of belonging by 20%. So, for example, you could use as a key indicator the number of residents in the percentage.
We have a couple of notes in here. So there's a suggestion of, as you just said, number of visits to the green space.
Brilliant.
Asking the residents how they feel.
Yeah.
And again, another note on the number of times they visit the garden. Suggestion on questionnaires to gain insight into whether they feel more connected.
Yes, and they are a questionnaire is a tool, and we will talk about them as well. But absolutely, we need to gain an insight, but we will need to measure it, and that's why we're setting an indicator. So, for example, in that case, their sense of belonging could be measured on a scale of 0 to 5, for example. We can also, we have made a time-bound SMART outcome, which means that we also have a time window in which we want to measure. And we also define the age range of our residents. So they're just a few examples, and I hope it makes a little bit more sense. Now, I hope you can see that measuring the changes becomes so much easier now. And make sure that the measurement indicators really align with the evidence that the funders will want to see, and that they are relevant to the focus areas of your project that your project is centered around. For example, broadly speaking, action funders will want you to show that there are positive changes to the people and the planet. So there are many different tools around to help you with measuring, and one that was already mentioned by yourselves in the chat would be a qualitative tool, which could be a survey. So interviews, focus groups, and questionnaires, photos and videos are all good starting points that will help you to measure. And just that's it. I've got my tools coming up there. So I just got a little animation there for you, and I've just need to change a few little windows on my screen. Then quantitative measuring tools use numerical data to make sense of the information. For example, scores on a test or survey answers on a 5-point scale, for example, that I mentioned. And for those, you use closed questions. Sorry, jumping back to the qualitative data, you can use open questions and use narrative forms such as thoughts and feelings to describe what is being evaluated. A good starting point is to take a look at the know-how at the NCVO, which is the Council of National and Voluntary Organizations, and they have a whole range of tools that can help you, and Karina will post a link in the chat in a second on how to develop your monitoring and evaluation framework. So go on and take a look at that. So I just need to rearrange some of my windows. Oh, and another brilliant tool, which Perrine can also share with you in the chat, it's called Which Tool to Use. That's really, really comprehensive. So we can also use, now the question is, how can we actually, what tools can we use again to measure? So some very, very simple ones that I have for you here. A post-it note. A post-it note. How can you measure? How can you measure change? You can change. You can measure change with tokens as well. We often do that in the supermarkets. Or you can also ask your community to vote for something, and you can measure the change, and you can see the change. So you can use those tokens, post-it notes, or dots on a flip chart paper, but we all had to migrate to a lot more digital tools, and that's why I kind of brought some of those up here. So for example, you can use, and you can use the dots in a digital format on Miro, or some pronounce it Miro. You can ask put questions in the questionnaire through SurveyMonkey, which some of you might know, which is has a basic free entry plan for you. But there's also Google Forms that you can use to ask those questions. Further, you can use tools such as Canva or Mentimeter to present then your findings as well. In Mentimeter, you can also create instant word clouds, Wordles. Remember, we used them quite a while ago as well. So there's quite a few different tools here. So if you like, or if you have any more questions, then we can just take a tiny little break, and I can take a question or two. If there are any there, I can't see any at the moment.
We haven't had any. We did have one at the end of the previous section from Rose about how we would evidence the change related to elderly residents having a better sense of belonging. But I think, Rose, we've answered that question. Yeah. So the only other question we've had has been from Ronnie, who's keen to know the name of the community project that is shown as an example. Is it a community project in existence, or is this one that you've fabricated for the session today?
Ronnie, this is a fabricated one that I fabricated for this session, but it's obviously bringing in quite a bit of experience by talking and helping community groups, and very often these are kind of typical kind of outcomes and measurement key indicators that you can use. So it's not a totally fiction one, but it doesn't exist in real life as that. When we share the slides with you as well, which we'll do after, you can zoom in as well. Some of the photos and images I have used are from real life projects as well. So this one is actually from Incredible Edible, which is really, really, you might have heard about Pam Warhurst as well. She's written a brilliant book as well. So have a look. But if there's no more questions for now. Oh, sorry, Ronnie, you got your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, the picture you've got up there now, is that actually some form of community project?
That is a community project indeed, yes.
Could you send me the details? Because we've not started yet. We're in negotiation of land with DEFRA, but
yeah,
that is our idea. I've not seen a picture like that before. So I'd like a copy of that picture, but I'd also like to know where that is for the possibility of visiting.
Yes, so you would find it really helpful if you had a few examples of community gardening projects, and I have certainly loads and loads, and I know that Semble has loads and loads of them as well. So we definitely can help you, Ronnie, there. Yeah.
I think that some of the people we're talking to, it's all political, and they don't really have a picture in their head. So I need these sort of pictures that are available.
Yeah.
But also need to talk to some of these people, because one thing we're trying to do is 100% accessible, and even things looking at the pathways there. That's important to us, and we can't get this information unless you're lucky enough to come across someone like yourself.
Yes, absolutely, and that's why I've chosen exactly that picture as well. It also shows the diversity in there, which is really, really important, and that people are having a lovely time, and that's still in their early stages. So yeah, Ronnie, we would definitely let you know, and if anybody else is interested, we're happy to share that information.
Would I be able to use that picture?
You'll have to ask the owner of the picture, which obviously I am not, but I'm sure they'll be happy. But you'll speak to them. We'll give you their details as well. No problem at all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. If it's okay with you, then I will just move on to impact reporting now, which won't take too long, and then we have a bit of time for a bit of Q&A, and also Lorna and Karina will talk to you a little bit more about Action Funder funding. So let me just go back to the train of thought. So once you've gathered your data and your evidence, all what there is left to do is now for you to pull it together and to shout about your success. Again, there are many different ways that you can do that. But on Action Funder, you will be likely asked to report in mixed formats. So if you are interested in applying for funding on Action Funder, listen carefully. The mixed format means that you will use both the written format and also some images. So the written format, you can list some tangible outputs, how many flower beds you've created, how many bushes you've planted, how many users you engage. And if you remember, you know now what the outputs mean. You can also, in a written format, you can also talk about the amount of volunteers involved, the amount of people who have benefited from your project, and that can be in the immediate and wider community. And if you come along to the third workshop in a couple of weeks' time, then we'll talk about immediate and wider community a little bit there as well. And you are obviously in the written format, you can describe the changes, your outcomes that you now have defined, and the impact of the project. And it's always in a concise and easy to read and understandable way that you want to report on. So that could be in the format of a standalone summary report, of which you have an example there. And again, that's the Impact Report 2018. The picture there is from Incredible Edible that you can look up on their website. And you can also see a variety of different tools of reporting. So you can create infographics, You can capture a quote from somebody's life that your project has transformed, and you've got there one at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. You can write a report that includes images and a Word document. In addition to the written format, you will be also asked to use the visual or spoken formats to report. So, for example, a spoken quote from the project owner or one of the beneficiaries in form of a podcast could be something that you'd submit as a report. Or, for example, your images and videos that best sum up the impact of your project that your project has made. And remember carefully, an image says more than 1,000 words. So all this proves to the funder what miracles you have achieved. And the good report will also show how the funding has been a vital part of making the change happen. Don't forget to mention how important the funding is in your report. And what's left then to do is to celebrate with the funder and your supporters, which you can do on social media or over lunch. Oh, talking about that, it's gone 1 o'clock. So it's nearly time to wrap up and let you go for your lunch, because you must be starving. But I will be available if there are any more questions in a moment. So I'm afraid that's all what we have got time for today. But before you go and grab your lunch, we would like to relaunch the little poll from the beginning to see if your understanding has improved a tiny bit, and perhaps for our impact measurement and our reporting. So thank you from me for being such a lovely bunch. And I'm handing over to Karina to launch the little poll. If you could be so kind and let us know now how confident you are after this session about demonstrating the positive changes of your idea and your project or your organization, that will be brilliant. At the moment, I can say that we have now more people who are fairly confident, and that's great. We still have some people who are only somewhat confident, and I think that's totally normal, because it's a very, very vast subject with a lot of jargon, and I only had about 25 minutes to share it with you. So bear with yourselves, bear with us. We will follow up. You will get some resources from this workshop, and I'm going to hand over now to Lorna and stop sharing my screen. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karina. And does anyone have any further questions for Karina at this moment on impact reporting, measurement, theory of change? Ronnie, you have a question.
Yeah, Action Funder, because I've not looked it up, the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
Is it chargeable or is it free?
I will come on to that in a moment. We'll give some more information on that in just a moment, and Karina and I can answer those questions. There were a few other queries on the session that we've just had. A question about sharing resource links, and we will share the resource links and the presentation and a recording of the session with everyone who's been here today. So do look out for that email in your inbox flying over in a couple of days' time. Before we move on to talk for a few minutes about Action Funder, just a big thank you to Karina for a brilliant plenary session. That was a really jam-packed 25 minutes. I, for one, feel very well equipped compared to at the start of the session to face and make the most of all the jargon, tools and outcomes associated with impact reporting. So we'll include Karina's social media and contact details in the follow-up email, so you can keep in the loop with any further sessions that Karina is running and reach out with any particular questions. Now, just a few minutes on Action Funder to get a sense of how many of you are using the platform and if any of you have any queries. For those of you who are entirely new to this, Action Funder is a platform that we launched just a few months ago. and we are helping community projects to access funding through the site. How many of you, just by a physical raise the hand, or digital if you prefer, are on Action Funder, signed up or involved? Okay, got a few. And so I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so about half and half. For those of you who haven't yet got involved, and to answer some of those questions, Ronnie, Action Funder is completely free for a community group, a charity, an informal group, a CIC to register, to simply sign up, add some details of your organisation, and then post any projects that you're looking for funding for. You'll then be automatically match made with funding when it becomes available. And that funding comes from businesses for the most part. So businesses that want to give funding to projects in a particular location, or projects that are focused on particular outcomes. So it's entirely free to use, and what we've really tried to focus on with this platform is to make it quick and easy for the community project side of things. We know that applying for grants can be a very arduous process, so we're trying to simplify this and really try to give space for community groups to be able to post and apply for funding for a project that they want to do, rather than for the funding that might be available, and try to kind of shape shift themselves into what grants are requiring you to achieve. So to everyone, for those who have already signed up and for those who haven't, it would be really great to get a sense of what you look for from a funding website, whether you have experience of funding from businesses, and what your kind of grant funding gripes might be. But also, if you have any further questions on Action Funder, I'd really like to just open the floor. So if you want to respond to any of that, or bring a question, do pop it in the chat or unmute yourself. Just a couple of questions would be brilliant. So if anyone wants to come in, now's your moment.
I have a question, because I applied on the micro funding, so the initial launch, and I really like the idea of obviously the platform and the fact that you can put a project on there and it's obviously matched. What I found quite difficult was there wasn't really any indication. Well, when I was looking at it, I didn't realize that like the word counts were actually character counts as opposed to like words. So I was like, oh, pictures, 700 words, fine. And then it was like 700 characters, like, damn it. So so I think that might, really, it's just a tweak to make it a little bit more obvious. And the fact that once you've done that bit, that then there's going to be a bit more information you're required. So maybe a little bit more explanation as to how it's set out, so that when you're doing it, and I was doing it slightly last minute, just, you know, so I sort of was like, oh God, I didn't realize I had to do this bit as well. And obviously in relation to this seminar, it makes more sense, but I wasn't aware of that. So I think that would help for people who are kind of new to it, like I am.
That's really useful feedback. Thank you. We're still tweaking and changing the site all the time, so that's great. A few more hands up. Alison, did you want to come in? Nope.
Can I maybe just relating to Rose's kind of comments and observations, that's why if you do the outcome triangle really in detail and almost have the different elements as little different documents, different folders, then you can use them over and over again for your different applications, and you're not kind of caught up with this kind of last minute, oh, where is my evidence and what do I want to measure and how am I going to measure and what's my outcomes. So once you kind of really thought that all through, then it's so much easier to pull that all out.
Brilliant. And so one last time for one last question. I think we're over time now. So Ronnie, you had a comment. You'll have to unmute one.
Yeah, sorry.
There we go.
Be quicker than that one. That's my age. Just leave it. Yeah, so we've been running since the beginning of last year, really. We have a committee, we have trustees. We're just applying for charity status. We're also applying for land from DEFRA, but we want to be proactive. So we don't want money at this minute, but the minute DEFRA says we can have the land, then we need the money. And we will be looking at it from all sources. Can we go on Action Funder now and put this up now? I mean, it is a plan. We're told that we're going to get the land, but we're waiting for DEFRA's Minister, Rebecca Powell, to actually approve it. She's for us, but civil servants are saying it's valued from, you know, it's got a value. So
Sure.
we got to wait. We got to wait. But we don't want to wait the last minute and then start getting money. We want to try and get people interested now. And we've done this with Surrey County Council, Runnymede Borough Council, and we need these people to come on board, because part of it is saying, yes, we got these people interested, because that's one of the questions DEFRA asks. Who's going to support you?
So Ronnie, it's quite easy to sign up and add your organisation details on Action Funder and not post a project. So if you do that, then if there are any matches that come up with businesses that match to your organisation, you'll be notified. And you don't need to add a project yet. When you're ready to add a project that you're looking for funding for in particular, so that might be one element of the garden space that you're creating. It might be a sensory garden, it might be a paving stone area, and you could add those as individual projects when the time comes. But for now, just upload your organisation and you will see matches come in from relevant businesses. We
do have the project, we do have it designed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in that we have a, you know, we know what we're going to do with workshops, gardens, biodiversity. It's all designed. Mm-hmm. So can we put all that up now?
You can put all that up now, and when you're looking for money for particular activities, you can add that later down the line.
Okay, thank you.
Not at all. I think we'd better go. Everyone's probably quite hungry if you're anything like me. And it was great to see the thanks and appreciation coming in for Karina in the chat. It's been a really brilliant session. Thanks so much for coming along today. Look out for more workshops for community leaders coming up. We have another session with Karina on the 22nd of June. Is that right?
Yeah.
Covering the kind of how to speak the funders language, really going through the jargon that was mentioned today. Before then, we have a session next week on the 15th, all about storytelling to attract funding. So do come along to those sessions. We will be sending links to those in the follow-up email. For now, have a lovely lunch, and thanks for coming along.
Thank you all. Enjoy the sunshine. Bye.
Great.